live around here?
I believe so.
No.
I don't think so. I think she just took off the end of last week or something, didn't she?
Teresa? She'll be back the 17th. Yeah, she's in Utah now.
Well, it's probably not. I mean, you can do it all by mail, but that's too bad. Was your mom the 84-year-old? What was it, a heart attack? Or?
Josh, the copy that's up here hasn't changed from what was posted on.
There have been a few modifications to it. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Larry, how are you, buddy?
There he is. It's okay, it was confusing.
Brought my
Oh, that's good. I mean, it is kind of good, you know.
Are we all ready? Or-
I thought about it, but if I squint.
Are we out there, Bill? Okay. I'd like to call to order the the 2017-2018 Budget Committee meeting. It is May 12, 2017. In attendance are Budget Committee members Kent Norris, Bill Sexton, Brian Green, Susan Walke, Mark Christie, Steve Brown, Larry Rich. Absent are Tina French, David Skirvin, and Mitchell Moore. First order of business is that we need to elect a Budget Committee chairman and vice chairman. So I'd like to open up the nominations for chairman. Do we have one? Larry?
I'd like to nominate Mark Christie.
We have one for Mark Christie. Any other nominations? Okay. Close the nominations for Mark Christie. All in favor of Mark Christie being our chairman signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Mark, you are our budget chairman. Now we need to elect a vice chairman.
So I'd open up the nominations for vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Susan Walke.
So Susan's been nominated. Are there any other nominees? If not, all those in favor of Susan being vice chair signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Susan.
Thank you, Mark.
So looks like we'll get started here, and I think the best thing to do is turn it over to Josh and let him get started, and we'll go from there.
All right. Thank you all for coming out today at the Budget Committee meeting. I've been diligently working on this. Mitch Moore has spent a lot of time as well this year in helping me craft this and make some necessary changes so we can stay consistent between the years and continue on with the acceptable accounting practices that were adopted last year for the formation of the budget.
Excuse me, Josh, will you make sure to speak into the...
Right
there?
there?
We go. There we
Got
go.
me.
Thank you.
Okay. The budget stays mostly the same from last year as far as resources are concerned, with our taxes at approximately $237,000 expected to come in from our tax levy. We have this year accepted a grant from the Siletz Tribe, which is not included in the budget, at $2,700. We do have one more grant out to the Special District Association of Oregon for $3,000, which we are not going to, which I did not include on the proposed budget for next year, as it's not completely secured at the moment. So we have many opportunities, and I do believe we will get grant funding to add to our resources next year in this budget cycle. And Oregon state law states that we can accept those gifts regardless of what's in the budget, of course. So once again, I wanted to keep everything as representative as possible in here. We have stuck with priority number 1 as reduction of harmful algal blooms for the district. We are reserving a fair amount of resources in the budget for that still. To date, the district has approximately spent $50,000 to $60,000 on the current design and engineering plan, which is done by Dr. Horn and HBH. We have learned much from that plan, and from that, we've had discussions with other outside companies with more prefabricated systems and that may have a more efficient setup for us at our lake. So we have halted that engineering project. There are still funds, of course, retained in this budget for consulting to cover the expense of the remainder of our expenses with the engineers. Our contract with Dr. Horn is over, and I believe we have paid out this year.
Back up real quick.
Sure.
So if we go back a page to page 5, I believe it is, because you were on page 6 going over the priorities. I noticed this is in the major variances from previous year's budget and upcoming year, and I think I spoke with you about this, making sure our messaging is the same throughout the budget presentation with respect to grass carp. If you note down here, this budget no longer sets aside resources for grass carp as a regulatory agency. They've banned their use and likely be several years until we can address that subject. And while I know we've adjusted our budget drastically for grass carp, we still have an allocation, I believe, of around $15,000 in there. So and then there's a couple other pages here where we reference grass carp, and the messaging is a bit different than this first message. So all I want to make sure we do is when we accept this in the form that it is in June, is that our messaging is consistent throughout. So if we can just look at those 2 or 3 different statements, make sure our messaging is correct, given we still are allocating funds to grass carp, and they potentially will end up being a likely source of what we might be doing in the future. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page on that.
Certainly, and some of these revisions have came up to the last minute, unfortunately,
Right.
on the budget, and I think it has came down to approximately $54.80 with grass carp at the moment in this budget. So it has been reduced slightly. Again, I did not, however, get rid of it completely, as those discussions haven't been had with the board yet in the community as far as which direction they want to go with that. I understand what you're saying about the consistency between the
Right.
statements, and I can
We
certainly
might,
make sure.
we might want to think about maybe the next board meeting to make the messaging consistent. The first priority, develop and implement a strategy for aquatic vegetation management and control. Well, was primarily a grass carp function, and I think it can also be an aeration, a result of aeration, but we ought to say develop and implement a strategy for reduction or elimination of harmful algal blooms and aquatic vegetation management and control, because when you go to explain priority number 1, below that, you talk right away about harmful algal bloom reduction as the primary focus for the district. So just to match up the messaging, I think we should stick harmful algal bloom reduction and in that number 1 above.
Okay.
So another comment, just because we're working towards a final document, a couple of things. On the top of this, it lists a date of September 30. So
Top of page 5, Josh.
yeah, well, all the pages, I believe. No, page 5 says September 30 doesn't have a year, doesn't have a current date. What date's supposed to be on there?
I think that it was actually, it just ran over from the previous page, unfortunately.
Okay.
It was supposed to be part of the budget calendar, and it
Oh,
it
yeah, I
got
think
pushed
you're
off
right.
to the next
It just
column.
ran
I can
into
make
the-
that
ran
formatting
in.
change, yeah.
Okay, so, and then back to page 6, again on the priority 1. The last sentence, priority 1, This may have been one of the things that you had corrected in your document. Yes, it was.
Yeah,
The
the
last
aeration.
sentence was taken out.
Yep, you did.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to cross.
Oh, yeah,
between
my
two
apologies
documents.
for the last-minute publication. Some things came to light late in the stage.
So where are we at now, Josh, on where should we be?
I think we're on page 6, going through priority
Okay.
2.
All
Does
right.
that sound correct?
Thank you.
We're talking about the voluntary septic inspection program here. We haven't made any changes. So that's a very important long-term goal of the district, I believe. And there's still $30,000 allocated in the budget to support that program. And that's the voluntary septic inspection program, and I believe also the furtherment of sewering Devil's Lake.
And on that subject, I know at the board meeting last night, with respect to the SOS program, you were going to come up with a, look back to see if there was any sort of application form, and then a criteria. And I guess I'm just asking the question with the sewer inspection or septic inspection program too, we need to make sure that, those funds that are available, there's a process for application and then a criteria for granting up to whatever the dollar amount the board chooses to make that. So I just guess I want to make sure that that's also in place, tying into the dollars that are available.
Certainly.
So,
And just to add an addition, I had a little note here also that, because we talked at the meeting last night also, the Septic Smart program, if we're referring to it in the document, I think it needs to be on our website, accessible. That would be a recommendation for the public to refer to it.
Sure.
It is on the website.
Yeah, it is, but I think it's
You gotta
kind of
scroll.
a...
You got to scroll a ways, but
Yeah, it's something we need to work on, and we spoke about that last night briefly in the board meeting to contact Jim Dewey to make some adjustments to the website to make it more navigable for many of these district priorities. So, priority number 3 is reduction of nutrient loading from the on-site septic systems, and effective use of technologies. This speaks about the Voyage Local Improvement District. I've changed the language in there to reflect the fact that it has been completed. We are still offering those reimbursements for residents who choose to hook up to that technology. I believe there was no change from the previous year as far as that is concerned. I believe, the first person is hooking up to that or scheduled to hook up already? So do we need to do the same thing, I guess would be my question, as far as an application process, like we would with a Septic Smart to provide that?
we don't have any reimbursement program. The reimbursement district, what that means is if the existing line is extended to the Lake Cove Drive area, which is the north of the existing district,
Okay.
then those folks will have to pay a proportionate share for the part of the line that goes from the treatment plant, the pump station, along Voyage to the Lake Cove Drive. It's like a quarter of the line that's in the that creates the entire LID. They have to pay a percentage portion of about a quarter of the one part of the line that goes along Voyage. That's what the reimbursement district means.
Okay.
So they pay in, and then everybody in our 60 property owners get a fraction of that back, and it's going to be like 10 cents a piece. That's how it's working.
Priority number 4 is what we have been discussing recently, and we've also recently seen that it's becoming more of a useful tool for us to get information out and generate community involvement. It deals with the website that was redesigned And as I've said, and started including the website report tools, keeping an eye on that, it's going to be invaluable as we continue. And there has been some funding this year directed towards these changes that we've talked about and things that will come up, because the website will definitely be dynamic for us as we move through these projects and need to get different pieces of information out.
Yeah, and I just got to commend you on what you've done so far. And I know you haven't done it, but you've directed it on the website design. It's 110% better than it ever has been before. And as we talked last night, I believe it'll get better. I think you know the things that need to get done in relatively short order to make it extremely user-friendly with those drop-downs and that information on there. But it's a very good use of district funds to make sure that that's a very user-friendly, and as evidenced by the additional hits and increase to the website you've got, I think that's a great sign right there.
I think it's gonna continue to be even more useful as we go, and like you said, it's a great reference point for people in the community and those who wish to travel here as well to know the status of the lake. So,
Josh, in Priority 5, there's a typo there, seeks to dredge the area, I think is what you meant to write.
yes. We do still wish to do something about the sediment around the D River. We're, however, evaluating some equipment by using the Airstream technology to see if it's going to be effective at moving sediments and heavier sediments. That being said, funds have been set aside for contracting activities, and I think that this falls underneath that. Also, those same funds could be used in case of an emergency dredging situation if the D River does block up. And priority number 6 is dealing with the founding element of vegetation management. We briefly talked about that earlier.
So on that topic, and referring back to my first comments with respect to grass carp and our messaging being the same, as you can see, if you read discussions in November 2015 between staff and ODFW, suggests that the department is cautious. Again, that terminology is a little bit different than we referred to in the first, so as long as we get our messaging correct. And I think the other thing that's really important from a budgeting standpoint, and Brian and the board spoke to this little bit last night, is making sure we have enough funds allocated for, because it'll be multi-pronged as far as our, efforts for keeping vegetation at a balance. That's something that could most likely creep up on us extremely quickly, and potentially with the advent of implementing what we're going to be moving forward with in whole lake, in the aeration process, whether it's in lake backbone and near shore aeration, that could speed up the process of vegetation growth too. So we absolutely can't get caught behind the 8 ball and be playing catch up on having a plan to address that ahead of it coming, because it will come.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Best way not to get caught behind is get the aeration system installed.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that's first order of business. So.
Well, and if I could piggyback on that, because I agree with Mark, once the vegetation starts growing, and we know that there's probably a slim to none chance that we are going to be able to balance out the grass carp, or it would at least be a long process. What kind of machinery may be out there that's being used in other lakes, and how much does that cost? Because, we had mentioned in the board meeting last night that Noel down at the marina, and I looked at it myself. I couldn't believe the difference between last year and this year on the amount of carp that's down there. it's really about 30% of what was there last year. So as that happens, things can domino pretty quickly, and we need to make sure that we have the money in the reserves to eradicate it quickly.
And have a plan.
And I started thinking forward towards that, especially the use of a lot of these funds can be delegated for many different purposes that have, you know, different ways to reach the goal. We have funds reserved in the transportation fund, which we'll talk about later, of course. But there's a fair amount of money to start and potentially buy a weed harvesting type boat. I've looked and talked with a couple of companies recently, and I've seen costs as low as $40,000 up into really whatever you want to spend. But I do believe that some of those funds could be directed towards that. The boat could be a dual purpose, of course, as a work boat for the lake, and also have the specialized use of being able to harvest and or transport some of that non-native material to get it out of the lake as well. So it's definitely in mind.
Yeah, I just hope we don't get to a harvesting situation, because I remember in high school I was pulling weeds out of the lake with a rake so that we could go water skiing, and I really don't think anybody wants to get back to that situation.
No fun, huh? Priority number 7 speaks about the Devil's Lake plan to reflect the current priorities. Some of this information is still a bit dated, given the change in employment the past year. This was not able to be performed and updated, and I do think that this is a very important component we'll work on in the upcoming year with discussions in the board, because the priorities that we have in the Devil's Lake plan are certainly going to echo through the budget and subsequent budget years as well. So. Priority number 8 seeks to quantify the sources of nutrients to Devil's Lake. And I think that we have this year even started shifting, using our funding to purchase things like the water monitoring equipment, which is going to directly monitor those. So I think that that is really addressing that priority as well as we can at the moment and in the near term, and in the future as we look out and use this information to guide our decisions. Projects outside of the priorities were previously pledging approximately $20,000 to Salmon Drift Creek Watershed Council. Fortunately, Salmon Drift Creek was not approved on their second attempt at obtaining a grant, so those funds were added back into the budget for this year.
And if I'm not mistaken, last night you repurposed a majority of those funds to go towards the one tool, or the pieces of the tool. Maybe you can explain that a little
Correct. The Sledge Tribe, once again, has generously kicked us off with a $2,700 donation to cover
awesome.
the handheld unit, definitely. And the remainder of that cost is approximately $18,000 for the full equipment suite that we've discussed in previous board meetings. And what that is going to do is shift that funding that, of course, was not going to be able to be used due to the grants not being approved, and directly apply it back to priority number 8. And priority number 8, of course, adds into many of these other priorities, but definitely our priority of whole lake aeration as well. So,
And actually, the board took action last night to give you the authority to go out and use those funds to do that in this current year's budget cycle.
correct. Page 8, we have a list of ongoing programs and activities that the district currently hosts or participates in. Many of these are very useful to the district as far as getting our information out. Such things as conferences where we can learn new information, learn about new technologies. Communications, our streaming of meetings from here at Lincoln City Council chambers. Some of the outreach programs, like the Devil's Lake Revival and Earth Day, we're revamping at the moment to decide which direction we want to approach those. So there are not a large amount of resources committed in this budget towards those events. However, we have committed a fair amount of resources to programs such as Save Our Shorelines, which is going to have a direct benefit on the water quality of the lake and around the lake, and also serves to be an outreach tool and engage citizens in the betterment of the lake itself. Our water quality programs are going to continue to be very similar to what they were in the past, with the differences of moving a couple of sample locations, which we've discussed in previous board and committee meetings. We will, of course, continue looking for E. coli in the lake. We'll continue monitoring algae, and in addition, we're going to implement the new water quality monitoring equipment that we just spoke of to get a better picture of these parameters that we have been sampling and several others that we have not, so we have a more complete idea of what our water is doing, how it's behaving, and how we need to address it in the future.
Josh, the new probe, does it come with software that simplifies compiling the data?
It does. It does. YSI has their own proprietary software that will connect up to the unit, even via Bluetooth, and it will put it out in a spreadsheet type format. So each individual parameter, ORP, salinity, pH, temperature, all that should read out just like you were looking at a regular Excel spreadsheet.
Whereas our old system, you were hand entering in all of the data, so you'll be able to hook up to the probe and it will put it on a spreadsheet and you can sort it or whatever.
Correct. We'll be throwing the pencils and writing the rain paper away
Right.
for that one.
Right.
So, and we spoke about it many times, but it'll be more accurate results as well as more comprehensive results. Talking about the fiduciary responsibility and financial summary on page 9, and I briefly spoke about this earlier. We're going to limit ourselves this year to our tax base, primarily for income, though we have some grant opportunities out. We have some that we've received funds from very recently, and at least one other one that is already applied for, and a couple more in the works. However, given the status of those grants and the fact that they are not guaranteed and they are grant funds, they have not been included in the budget as part of our financial resources.
So I just want to stop on that topic real quick because fiduciary responsibility and our transparency to the public is paramount. And one of the ways that we do that and we ensure that our proposal that we put together and the books that we have an accounting firm that we engage services for to ensure that we are doing everything properly, and if there are areas that we need to modify or change, that those are brought to our attention, then we have the ability and go ahead and take that action to make those corrective changes if needed. And at the end of last year's budget cycle, I'd asked Kent, because a number of us had concerns about past budget presentations and information that may have been included in there, and I just wanted to make sure that, because I read through those evaluations and I saw nothing in there that would indicate that anything was done improperly, but I still had concerns, and a number of us had concerns about that, and so I asked the question. I know you and I have talked about that, so what I would like you to do prior to the June adoption of the budget is reach out to the gal that's helping you with books, and then have those discussions so that, and then get some sort of response back on a couple of the past audits to make sure that they didn't miss anything. So
I can definitely make that a priority.
that would be great.
The next paragraph just deals with a detailed budget narrative, which is found at the end, and it really is just a guiding document to help with the calculations. So there may also be some approximations included in that, but it is included to keep the process transparent. The general fund, as you all know, is the annual operating fund for the district. It's where most of our resources are pulled from, and where most of our taxes and grant funds go into. We have maintained our $100,000 unappropriated ending fund balance in this next grant, or in this next budget cycle as well, so there will be no change there. Spoke earlier, but current taxes are within $10,000, I believe, of last year, higher this year. Most of the funds in the general fund are associated with the operations, as I mentioned, and materials and services, things such as personnel services, capital outlay for equipment, debt service is listed. However, it's also described in this budget. We do not currently have debt service, given the stage of our project entering into the permitting phase, potentially with a large aeration project that we're planning on. We don't look to have to need any debt service in this next budget cycle, so there is not any included in this budget.
Josh, can I ask a question on this? Page 10, which you have the unappropriated ending fund balance listed on the charts. Both charts, one resources, and then the requirements. So under the resources, you listed as 23% of the chart for the funds, and on the bottom, it's 25%. So I guess I'm questioning, is there a 2% difference?
I don't believe so.
Resources versus requirements?
Yeah, I don't
Because
believe
that's
so.
a 2% deficit.
Yeah, I know previously that the UEFP was hovering around $80,000, and I believe that that was shored up to come up to $100,000. So this may just be pulling some data from a different field or something, but I'll look into that and make sure.
No, both pie charts add up to 100%. That's all you need. That's right. It's
Yes,
correct.
well, I checked those figures, they did.
But it wouldn't necessarily be the same
Right, they wouldn't
percentage
necessarily be the same.
of requirements and resources.
Right. So I think it's right.
And along with that, if you look at pie chart figure 3, you'll see it says transfer to improve min. Should be a T on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the T got-
T's down below.
it got
It dropped
below.
down.
Oh, okay,
And,
all right, I see it
It's
now.
the T,
Another
sorry.
Freudian slip.
We're just helping you edit.
I'll find him and put him where he belongs.
Move that over there.
Previous page.
And these transfers and these pie charts describe the 2006 directive from the board that states that the general fund will not exceed the current year's resources, and unspent monies are supposed to be transferred into one of our reserve accounts. Typically, that is the improvement fund.
Right.
On page 12, we talk about the general fund resources. And we briefly talked about this already. The resources from taxes in the 2017-2018 budget year are expected to be approximately $237,522, with the $100,000 UEFB, which we use to carry us to the next budgetary period and pay for our expenses until the next taxes are received from the county. The net working capital is described in this budget, and that comes from the LGIP. That includes the monies in the district's local bank accounts, checking account, and investment funds. And they are summarized here in figures 2 and 3, which I believe are on page 13 and 14.
One of the things I would say, Josh, is that and I know I dealt with this last year, we talked about it and wondered about it, was the TLC Money Market Fund of $3,010. I don't even know if we need that. Just as looking, I remember when I was dealing with the budget and all the working capital and stuff, and I just have often wondered, what is that? And it's still floating out there, and it seems to go from year to year. Probably in the future we can either transfer that to another fund so that we can move it out of that.
Especially if we're charged a service fee of any
Right,
sort.
and I mean, it's money market now is receiving nothing.
Yeah.
And so, anyhow, it's just something to think about. As I looked at that, I thought, oh,
Yeah.
that's come up again.
Yeah, well, and that might be a great idea too. Everyone knows the complexity of getting this budget in and getting it balanced. So one less line item in there, if it's not giving the district any good being out there, and one less account to service, like you're saying, it may actually cost. We may make money by closing that account
Right, yes.
for the interest versus the service. So okay, I'll look
Well,
into that.
I'd kind of like to bring up another discussion on that. Because of today's environment, you know, is it time within the district to look at conservative investments where the monies that are in reserves, where we can get some kind of return? Certainly not in a regular savings or any kind of money market. But is there an investment that will give us some sort of return for the amount of money that we have in reserves?
You can definitely have that conversation with TLC and see if there's anything available to local governments to tap into.
Well, most of all of our accounts are all through the state. So monies go to the state, and then when we need them to in our checking account to spend them, we pull them out of the state, so that from the state, and so they're governmental. I can't remember.
LGIP, local government investment pool.
Right,
Yeah.
and so they're part of that pool that everything goes to, and so it's safe.
It's an incurred balance that's there that you pull, but
Right,
not a lot of control outside of that.
right. I think the key there is it's safe.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
we're pretty restricted by law on
Right.
where you can put it. So,
The next paragraph just goes on to describe previously levied taxes, which are always an estimate, of course. And they were approximately $7,500 for this budget year, and an interest of about $500 on those monies. They're expected to be received in the upcoming year, and they will be available for appropriation and have been included in this budget as well. And I believe this is, the rest of this paragraph really goes on to describe, at least the bulk of it, what we were just discussing as far as the investment funds and the change in money market type accounts from a high of like 5.3% to less than 0.5% now. And it's my understanding that they're still pretty close to that low mark. So the total resources in the general fund are the sums of the net working capital, previously levied taxes, interest, and UEFB, which we maintain at $100,000 to carry us through, grants, donations, and our estimated taxes, which I just described. Currently, that totals $544,706, and that's described down here in Table 1 and also line 32 of the LB20. Our requirements necessary through the end of the fiscal year, which will carry us through the end of June. Also an estimated number, of course. Personnel services at $15,000, materials and services at approximately $20,000, giving us approximately $35,000 to get us through the end of the year. We don't foresee any expenditures over that amount, and that should certainly cover the rest of our operations for that time period. Our estimated taxes to be received, and our tax levies are going to be the same as they have been in the past, with the outside rate and the inside rate. With the inside rate being at 0.2499 and the outside rate being at 0.1280 per thousand. And those calculations are included down here in Table 4 as well. The end of Table 4 is just a description of our taxes after the 2.6 accrual has been added in and the 5% loss from levy, and that puts us at the 237,522 number that I spoke of. We are not subject to any compression losses, so those are not included in the calculations.
Just a quick editing thing in Table 4 under total assessed inside. There probably should be a comma between the 465,000, comma 665.
Sure. Good eye, Kent. Page 15 is a description of the general fund requirements, which you'll see on Forms LB 30 and LB 31. These cover our yearly operational needs of the district, the nuts and bolts of how we operate and how we fund our day-to-day and projects. The structure is the same. There's a description in the paragraph about the changes that were made last year that we briefly talked about earlier, about everything has been organized to be consistent with Oregon statutes and laws. It's been organized by organizational unit rather than by fund, as it had been in the past, and we will stay consistent with that as well. The LB 30 is a synopsis of spending on materials and services from our general fund. Details on LB 30 and 31 both. Appropriations made in the general fund. These specifically cover personnel services, debt service, capital outlay, transfers, and contingency funds. And by Oregon law, they must equal the resources available. They are balanced, as you can see on the forms. Also, last year, there was a second sheet added, the non-allocated funds, which is in there to be consistent once again with state laws and how the budget is put together. We have a total of the net working capital, current year interest, delinquent taxes, and UAFB put us at approximately $544,706 for appropriation. A total of $224,450 of expenditures has been appropriated from the general fund for the operations of the district in this budget. Personnel services this year will be largely the same. There has been a bit of a reduction in the total cost. Last year they were slightly over $80,000. This year in this budget we're going to be at $70,700, which $59,500 has been apportioned for salary. Also, as described in that paragraph, health and disability insurances are within $20, I believe, as they were last year, so there has been no change to the appropriations made for those items. Materials and services covers lots of different things within the district that we need to continue our operations, perpetuate the projects and goals. They are in detail in the LB 31, and in this budget year they total $128,500. There is some capital outlay from the general fund included here. This will cover needs for basic office equipment. Specifically, we've had some discussions about hosting video from our website, about making our website more useful and more of a nexus for the district as far as where people can go to find information, keeping it up to date and making it more comprehensive and visible to the public in our community. So I've set aside $2,340 to make some proposed computer upgrades, mainly storage. A lot of these files are very large. And I'll be getting with our IT professional, Jim Dewey, on that to see exactly where and how we can allocate that to maximize its benefit, to further the use of our website. The next section is non-allocated funds. A total of $100,000 has been appropriated from the general fund, which is not assigned to an operations unit. An additional $105,256 is reserved for future expenditures, and of course the $100,000 UEFB. We already covered debt service earlier. We will not be pursuing any loans or any bonds this year, given the stage of our project, so there is no debt service included in this budget. Our transfers and contingency, we briefly spoke about earlier. The district's reserve fund, the improvement fund, at the close of the fiscal year 2017-2018, this budget, $100,000 is expected to be available for transfer. In previous years, the interfund transfer has been limited to $100,000, which is the same recommendation this year. Recent changes in the district operations, this budget retains the remaining $105,256, $105,250, as reserved for future expenditures in the general fund, and that will give us some headroom for the following budget if we do not see a need to appropriate those funds in the meantime. The transportation fund covers the cost of purchasing a new district vehicle and boat. In total, the transfer from the general fund is budgeted at $10,000, approximately $5,000 for either of those, but that's kind of up to us what benchmarks we want to set for the price and purchase date of that equipment. We haven't had those discussions yet, so I have not put a capital outlay in this budget for the purchase of either of those pieces of equipment yet. However, given this transfer from the general fund into the transportation fund, we certainly could fund most likely both of those things if we wanted to. However, I think we should have a discussion about particularly the boat in relation to vegetation management and how we can do that, because if we have that funds reserved, $20,000 or so available for a boat purchase would certainly be great seed or start money to cover a good portion of vegetation harvesting boat if that need arises so quickly. It may be advantageous for us to consider that for the future purchase. The next paragraph is transfers and contingencies. It speaks about the transfer from the general fund to the improvement fund, which I stated earlier at $100,000 is expected to be available for transfer. Previously, it's been $100,000 as well. Repeating myself. Sorry about that. Transfers and contingencies paragraph, the third paragraph down, talking about the contingency dollars. Last year, $5,000 was set aside as contingency. That's the same thing that we did this year, that $5,000 for contingency in this budget year.
Well, Josh, why would we not put more in contingency? I mean, doesn't mean we need to spend it, but rather than run the risk of a supplemental budget because, we have to spend more than $5,000, it's not otherwise budgeted, why don't we max out the contingency fund? I mean, that seems to be the best way to avoid having to do a supplemental budget if something comes up that we don't expect.
I can definitely look into that. With the headway that we have with $105,256 up in paragraph 1 of transfers and contingencies, I think we could certainly put that together.
Yeah, I think that makes perfectly good sense, Brian.
5,000 seems pretty low.
Yeah.
Well, if it was 15% of the budget, that would be somewhere in the $30,000 to $40,000 range as a contingency instead.
It just gives you the flexibility then to have those funds available without having to go back and do something. So, and given all of what we will accomplish in the next year, there's definitely going to be some dollar capital outlay, and I think that it's wisdom to go ahead and do that.
The next paragraph speaks about the unappropriated ending fund balance. It's a reserve necessary to fund the government activities through the first half of the following fiscal year based on when we receive our tax disbursements. Our annual tax base this year, as we discussed, is approximately $237,000. These monies are not available until halfway through the fiscal year. We have, and in the past budgets, the UAFB has been at $100,000, and that seems to work out well for the district. So for purposes of this budget, it's also at $100,000. On page 17, looking at the detailed expenditures, which is LB 31. I spoke earlier there, total materials and services for the general fund are $128,500. These are a lot of the funds necessary for day-to-day operations of the district. Our accounting for this year has been budgeted at approximately $11,000. Audit costs around $4,000. I believe we spoke about that in earlier board meetings. And that reserves about $7,000 for bookkeeping, and I think in this past year, actual costs were somewhere around $6,000 or so. So we want to stay consistent with that, and I think that is the extra bookkeeping is necessary to continue the separation of duties appropriately within the district as we need to financially. So Consulting funds have been set aside. These funds can be used for things such as an internship, which we're currently trying to form with Oregon Coast Community College. That's approximately $12 an hour. Also, our interim manager, who is now our per diem project manager, Tom Wood, can also his position is related to these funds as well. When we need his assistance for help on these larger projects and capital projects, that it's just too much for one person to manage at one time. So those funds are set aside for that.
One of the things I was going to say, Josh, I know that that's what we're thinking of paying our intern, $12 an hour, but if we go through the hire of her or him, we go through the temp service, and it costs us 50% more.
Okay.
So if we're going to plan on paying $12 an hour, we pay the temp service $18 an hour. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, it comes out. Okay.
Just I don't know if that'll make a big difference or not, but
I will take a look and make absolutely sure. I'll also take a look at our project needs and see what we're a little tighter estimate on how many hours we may need for assistance with these projects in the upcoming year as well. The next item is contracting. There are several docks that bust loose on the lake, many other tasks and activities which are not within the district's ability or equipment ability to be able to handle. I've set aside approximately $12,000 to help with this. This gives us some flexibility. These funds can also be used for things such as emergency dredging of the D River. It's very general concept, and contracting is very general things happen on the lake and have to be taken care of to protect the health and safety and navigable waters that we have.
So on that topic, I don't think you have this in writing, but you mentioned that these funds could be used for, there was a dock that floated away. I had a great meeting with Barry Brewster this morning, and what Barry told me, we talked specifically about two docks that have floated away, and are one's at Tina's location, one's over by Knowles. And what Barry told me is he is more than happy. He's got a grant. He's got grant monies from Solve. So if there is any sort of debris that's floating, all we need to do, and I'll get with you more on this, but I'll get you Barry's contact information, share it vice versa. But he said give him a holler. He will go take care of that, get it removed. So, you know, there won't be any cost to us. That's part of what they do and what he's offered to do. So I thought that was fantastic news. So we'll be able to really forge a great relationship, I believe, with Barry, and it'll be mutually beneficial to the board as well as DNLA. So,
no, I think that's a great idea, and I think it's a great idea to have those relationships with our emergency responders in and around here for sure, because they know the area. A lot of them have grown up around here and on the lake as well, so they're pros at this.
yeah.
Josh?
That, missing a comma on that 12,000 down there too.
And I had a change on the first sentence. It should be to stage, install, and maintain this new equipment, or maintenance of this new equipment. Maintenance.
And maintenance, okay. I got needs to be maintained. Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah.
Good catch.
Yeah. The next part's very straightforward. It hasn't really changed from past years. Spoke with Dana Jenkins. It's approximately $950 for our elections cost that we put out every 2 years for the board elections. There's no foreseeable change with my conversations with him, so it will remain at $950. Next section is equipment and facilities operation and maintenance. This includes estimates, and this was previously in another budget, I believe, when we were looking forward to having the full lake aeration system in and anticipating some things like electrical costs. Well, Now that we have the piece of Airstream equipment on the lake, we've been testing it to see what kind of good we can do and how it's going to affect our water. I have budgeted approximately $5,400 for that equipment like that in the future to pay for things, electricity and basic maintenance costs.
So I'll give you a perfect example on this one. So I think the next relocation site is going to be over in Horseshoe Bay. Is that correct? And then I believe that Pat Dooling has offered to have his have it anchored off of his property. So what we're going to need to do, and I'm assuming you're going to probably direct this, is we need to get an electrician out there to make sure that he's got the proper hookups to protect his property as well as the equipment. So that would be one of those costs within this $5,400 line item that you would use to help do those type of upcoming expenses, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Perfect.
The rest of that is a previous $9,300 appropriation for boat storage operation of that equipment. Erosion and sediment control, I have budgeted at $5,000 in the current year, and that is going to factor into this equipment or equipment like it. Alternative methods we're looking at outside of dredging areas due to permitting constraints and budgetary constraints. Dredging is not one of our better options for the district at this moment. So $5,000 has been budgeted to operate the equipment if it does continue working for us for these purposes or continue looking for other methods. Our property insurance, as I mentioned earlier, is approximately the same this year at $2,970. Much change. Lake level management this year covers the cost of our lake contractor, which does some great work for us, taking daily lake measurements, placing dam stanchions, placing boards, pulsing the dam necessary on schedule according to our water rights and laws. $6,000 has been appropriated this year for those activities.
So just a quick question on that too. With the advent of the tests that we're doing with the near shore aerator, will the lake contractor, whoever that happens to be, or will you be looking at someone else that we potentially would have an obligation to pay to relocate, you know, whether it's that or other things? How would that, what part of the budget would that come out of?
This is really a decision we'll have to make once we get there, once we see what we have available as far as a lake contractor.
Okay.
Because if we have, obviously...
So that could fall under that category.
Certainly, and it's more geared towards what's been done in the past as far as having a standing contract to take care of those specific and very, very necessary tasks,
right,
so we stay in compliance as we need to as a district.
Because this obviously is the next tasks that we'll have, that we'll be doing over the next year or so.
Correct, correct. And once again, we don't know if we're going to have 2 or 3 applicants, or we're going to end up with one person as our lake contractor. So it very well could be that our lake contractor has this contract of $6,000 to do the normal maintenance, normal scheduled lake operations, which that contract also includes a bit of very minor kind of contracting work, nothing on a larger project level. But that's where that additional contractor money comes in.
Okay.
So it's kind of a multi-purpose use for those funds.
I just want to, just since we're going into a different phase and we know we're going to have costs associated with that, just want to make sure that we have the proper funds allocated when those things come up. So.
Certainly.
Perfect.
One addition to that, Josh, you might want to include the storage facility to store dam materials.
Okay. I can do that. That is heavy and bulky stuff.
And whether or not the district has a storage facility, whether it be
And I
that clarified in the description.
Legal costs this year have been budgeted at approximately $2,000. That doesn't cover a lot of attorney time, but there's certain other costs that fund can also be used for, such as the Government Ethics Committee, which we are a part and we make payments to every year to participate. So $2,000 has been budgeted for that. Some other things come up, such as notices sometimes require certification or a public notary or someone to stamp or sign off on something, and those costs will also be able to cover that. Monitoring expenditures is one of our most important expenditures out of our operations for sure. It covers bacterial, harmful algal bloom surveillance, physical and chemical monitoring programs. And as I mentioned earlier, we have been talking about expanding that out a little bit, depending on what we find this year for sampling and how this new equipment plays into our regime of what we have planned. This number is approximately $13,000 this year, and that covers sample containers, sample trays, some other basic expendables, lab analysis and shipping items such as that relate directly to the water quality results that we take every year in post.
Yeah, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mary and Kathy were instrumental in taking a lot of those samples throughout the water quality testing period, and that was awesome because I'm sure that saved the district a lot of money, and we sure appreciate all those efforts.
It has, and we do, and I'm meeting Mary this afternoon to get her some more bottles and equipment. So she's on top of things. She's got the schedule out and started, and we're on track with that. And I am diligently trying to get us an intern to come in and be able to get trained off with their expertise so we can make this a little less a volunteer effort and be able to keep our volunteers in the committee levels where they can really do the most good. So as much fun as it is to go fill a bunch of water bottles and spend a half a day in the lab, only certain people enjoy that. Nutrient control this year is at 0. It's really covered by several of these other operations, including monitoring, and it plays into things such as the aeration equipment as well. There's no specific dollars in this category at this time.
A question on that.
Sure.
Seeing that there's zero monies put towards the nutrient control, how will we ever know what nutrients are coming into that lake if we don't have a cover fee budget number to provide us the information, let us know how much phosphates are coming in, how much nutrients are coming in. No, we don't have a story on the loading situation, so I would recommend that we develop that so that we know what kind of new phosphates are coming in.
Do you feel like we could tie that in with our monitoring program and some of the other?
If that new device will give us nutrient loading
It
reading,
will. It will. It will be set up for nitrite and phosphate.
so that we could develop some kind of an overall view of how much of that stuff's coming in, so we don't have to address it.
Yeah. And the aeration project is not necessarily the monitoring portion of that nutrient for sure. That's really our efforts to abate that issue.
I just think it's crucial that we know what's coming in and how to develop a system to.
And to Bill's point, I think, and I know all of the board, many of us have chatted about this over the last number of years, and Steve, I know, is very keen on this also, is we have to have the data so that we can make, and the board can make informed decisions going forward, and also know, because you have to have that data, when we implement, we are going to the aeration program, we need to have that baseline data, and then we need to be able to have something to judge a year to 5 years down the road to say, wow, look at the change. If we don't have the data to start with, it's very difficult to make those things. And nutrient loading data, phosphates, anything coming into the lake, and I know you know this, is an important aspect of that validation that what we're doing and the monies we're spending are accomplishing what the objective is.
Definitely.
So that absolutely has to happen.
And I think, like I said, through some of these other programs and really just last night, having the go-ahead and making the decision to get this new water quality equipment. So things are kind of being discussed on the fly. That can also be used in some of the other suspect waterways, such as Thompson Creek. You know, it won't detect things like E. coli. That's still a culture-type biological test. But we can definitely look at the inputs closer now because we won't be bottling water and sending it off to a lab. And we won't have any of that in-between middleman. We'll be able to go out and take a real-time measurement.
And maybe that's where we take something like that completely out and we weave that same thing in a more specific manner into one of our other locations so that we know we actually don't miss that, and that is one of the things that we're targeting.
Does that sound like a good option, Bill?
You know, while we're on that point, the starting point, I think, would be to organize the data that we already have, because we've got a lot, and I think a lot more than people realize, and so we should get that organized first. And I could help you with that a little bit,
I would
whether
absolutely
I'm on the
love that,
board or
yeah.
not.
Yeah.
So,
I appreciate it, Brian, definitely.
Awesome.
Steve, did you?
Yeah, I guess, did we decide that we're going to keep that category, nutrient control, or are we going to combine it with monitoring?
My opinion, as I've kind of briefly discussed here, is I think it's really covered under monitoring. I don't know if everyone's in agreement with that.
I think it should be separated.
Under monitoring, well, like Mark just mentioned, we'll add the language into monitoring that specifically talks about monitoring the nutrients and the inputs on the lake using the new monitoring equipment and other methods. Does that sound
As long
acceptable?
as it's an addition to our story, I'm behind it.
Does that sound good?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, we just don't want to be, and I would hope that the board isn't in a reactive mode. To me, nutrient control really sets it as a priority for the district, that we do monitor around the shoreline, and we look at the nutrients that are going into the lake. And, you know, that's its own category, in my opinion. And, you know, we're not in a reactive mode if we're always looking at reducing the load into the lake.
And I think Josh is right, and you guys are right too. You can specifically put that under monitoring as a subsection so that it's specifically spelled out and you know it's important. And then we have, you know, you designate, for lack of a better term, stormwater runoff areas where the creeks come in, that's where we take those samplings. I don't know that that's the place, but if it is, you know, that's what we end up doing. Again, and Brian said, and I believe it's all there, you know, we need to take that data that we know we've already got, have it, you know, plugged in so that we make really good decisions going.
And continue the data.
Yeah.
Continue.
you know, there's also been discussion at our sewer committee, and I think by the board, and formally and informally, that, you know, we may need some types of consulting services to move the sewer project forward. And, you know, I look at the sewer project as a nutrient control project. That's what it is. It's a phosphorus and nitrogen control project. And I don't, do we have anything? Last year, it seemed to me we had about 30,000 set aside for those kinds of services. I don't see where that is in this budget at all.
I think it's still in the sewer.
Yeah,
I saw
I think there's-
30,000 somewhere in the
Okay,
sewer.
there's 30 in for the sewer, but
I think
not
they-
for nutrient
I think it
control.
Okay.
may have
That sounds
said for grants and stuff like that, but I believe that's what that targeted dollar amount is.
Yeah, that's for that 30,000.
Okay, so that's something we're going to get to here.
Yeah, we haven't got to it
Okay,
yet.
all right.
Next section is office operations. This covers our office rent, furnishings, phone, internet, different district operations related to the office, and that is at $23,650 this year. Our public relations covers the cost of outreach, education, conferences, and communication. It also covers the district holding its regular monthly meetings here at City Hall and special meetings such as now here at City Hall, and the televised service as well to Channel 4.
I was just going to say, too, that having our office at the community college plus being able to use this facility, those are two big things for us, and we really appreciate both the community college and the city for hosting us, because I think it just makes our operation that much more professional, and it's much appreciated.
I would completely agree. I have a great office there and some really great people around that are extremely helpful. So these are described on, the total is $11,000 this year, and that's described on public relations on the LB 31 form. Next one's training and continued education. That's a component of that outreach, and that is set at approximately $600 this year to cover the need of certain classes and certifications that need to be done. The transportation covers the district vehicle, which gives us the ability to tow the boat around to different locations, move materials, get out to sampling spots, local transportation, regional transportation to meetings outside of Lincoln City and other places as well. Covers fuel and maintenance and items related to that. $7,500 is set aside this year. I believe that's $200 more than last year, which was at $7,300, so it's staying pretty consistent.
Is the truck holding up okay?
You know, she's a good truck. She's got a nice patina. I think for the time being that we're safe. I feel safe in it. It starts, it runs, it does what it needs to, so we can have those conversations when we get more of a need for it,
Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
All right, good.
And while we're on that topic, the other thing that I think you should investigate going forward when it comes to specifically the truck is when it comes at replacement time. I know we're setting aside funds in the in the budget to replace it, but we may also want to consider, given the low mileage use, it may be a perfect application for a 3 to 4 year lease, and that limits our exposure on warranty and any sort of major repairs, and you get to freshen it up every 3 to 4 years, and I would bet you by the time it was all said and done, that would save more money than buying the equipment and, you know, having it for 10 years and getting into a spot where you potentially could drop some serious dollars into the maintenance side of it. So just something that we should investigate.
Yeah. I've definitely been in the case where you have a $2,000 car and a $5,000 repair, so I understand. And I have looked at some of those options as well, and I've came up with an average of around $330 a month to cover something like a full-size four-wheel drive pickup truck of some average brand. And most of those also, like you said, include everything. Oil changes as well.
Yeah,
so
and
maintenance is really zero.
It really limits your, and again, what makes it possible is that, you know, I'm going to say at the most you're putting on 10,000 miles a year, and that might be high, or at least average, and that falls right into a ideal scenario for a leased piece of equipment.
I would agree. My employment with the district so far, I don't rack up a lot of miles on that truck, even going out of town for a few meetings every now and then. Everything's very close here, which is very nice. But probably sits in traffic on Friday afternoons more than anything. We do have, I did set aside $2,500 for vegetation management and control in the district. We've had some reports from our recent investigations and design work on the aeration system that have suggested that some revegetation has started. So I wanted to have some funds in there and available. Like we've discussed, it's something that happens very rapidly, and I know that's a very marginal amount of money, but if it's not a big problem and we can get to it and it won't cost us a lot of money, at least the funds are already set aside for it. The capital outlay, I believe we've talked about in here, $2340 for upgraded computer equipment and storage to help with a new website and getting our information out, things as well as sample results. And as we integrate things into the district like this new equipment, we will have a continued need to be able to host that information and get it out into a visible and navigable format to the public, so it has its maximum benefit. The next section speaks about the reserve funds. In 2007, the district created the wholly encompassing improvement fund. This includes a lot of activities within the district and things we set aside money for, such as vegetation management, watershed protection, capital improvements, large equipment purchases, algae control, and other improvements that may become more apparent as we move through time. I think the initial transfer in here was $250,000 when that fund was established. It has grown and continues to have a healthy positive balance for us to work from. Most of these funds recently come out of the general fund, since we do not exceed the balance of our general fund more than our tax appropriations for the year. As we discussed earlier, that will go into the improvement fund. We don't really receive much or any interest from those funds, and we had that discussion earlier. Brief conversation in here about the transportation fund that was created last year, which is the governmentally acceptable way to fund the purchase of the truck and boat that we were just speaking about. Still on the improvement fund here, we expect to have $394,380 available in the improvement fund at the end of this budget year. An interest of $3,000 and expected transfer of $100,000 from the general fund. This revenue fund should have approximately $497,500 available for appropriations. That's described in Table 6.
Is that interest dollar amount actually?
At $3,000. That's what I had according to our financial records under that category.
Yeah, I was going. Can I get on that deal?
I get on that deal.
This next, the next page is describing the LB11 and our projects section that we're working on. In 1617, the district contacted Dr. Horn, which is a very highly qualified limnologist, to evaluate the lake in 17 different methods. We came down to the most viable and most effective method, which would be aeration for harmful algal bloom management. Dr. Horn has been interfacing with HBH Engineering, which was the engineering company whom was awarded the engineering portion of that contract. Currently, we have halted the engineering phase of the project. As we have moved through it, many different aspects have come to light as far as the fundability of the system, the effectiveness of it, and the appropriate type of system to install, and as well as our time frame. That being said, as I mentioned, the engineering project was halted. Approximately $60,000 has been expended on that project so far. We have learned much information for us, and it has definitely guided us in a direction that we need to go in order to get this installed to maintain our water quality. Talk about vegetation management again in here. We spoke about this briefly earlier, that there's a $5,480 appropriation that is still in our budget. That's for the efforts of vegetation management. In particular, it speaks to the use of grass carp in this paragraph, which is something I believe that we're going to discuss as a board in the near future to decide how we want to approach that from our revisiting the Devil's Lake plan.
So, and again, that's that third piece of making sure our messaging's correct. And I know in your first proposal, there was a different allocation in there, and that was adjusted, which is fine. But it also says, do we still have a consultant do we still have a retained consultant on this or not, that you're aware of?
I don't know exactly what that reference was to. I don't know if that was in reference to a plan that had already been completed or actually in reference to our
Initial
That
application.
was Joe Eilers, and he's completed his contract, so as of this moment, we don't have a retained.
so he's
Okay.
not retained
Yeah, I
anymore.
just-
Okay.
Just needed to make sure. So we might want to adjust that wording in there to, basically take that out, since we aren't looking, at least at this point in time, to retain a consultant.
Sure. The next paragraph is in regards to sewer systems. Devil's Lake actively promotes sewering around the lake. It's definitely one of the best long-term strategies to reduce our nutrient loading, which is a prime factor in algal blooms and harmful algal blooms in the lake. City of Lincoln City recognized the need of sewering Devil's Lake, and they have been an active partner in helping us pursue these goals in the long term. The Voyage Lake LID has been completed. Briefly spoke about that earlier.
So while we're on that topic, I think, Brian, that's the 30,000.
Yeah, it's in this paragraph.
My
That's what it's in.
only concern here is we specifically call out grants and rebates. So if we're going to have grants and rebates, again, it goes back to the discussion you had last night on SOS, and then the discussion we had earlier in the Budget Committee meeting about whatever else that topic was, as far as protocol for grants that anybody would be applying for. If we're stating that in here, then we need to make sure that we actually have those two items in place. If that's what the board chooses, there needs to be an application form and a dollar amount that the board needs to approve as up to a certain amount based on these qualifications. If that's not going to be the case, then that's fine too, but I believe that really needs to get clarified.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off that too. Do we have a program for rebates for the sewer? Is there a set policy out there that the district has?
No, there's a short answer to that, it's no.
No.
Yeah, we shouldn't be stating that we do.
I don't even know where that came, I mean, I guess there
I
was
think
some
there was
idea.
projected that there was, like in last year's budget, we projected that their potential could be there. And so that's why that wording occurred.
And
I think it's a
okay
good
either-
idea.
It's okay either way, but if we're going to have it, then you guys need to have a board policy
Right.
that states it. If not, then we need to take that out of the budget message and call it something else for it. Like Brian said, those funds may be needed to hire a consultant to move the sewer project forward.
To
Well, this
investigate
came
the
out- yeah.
potential.
Yeah, right.
Well, I remember the conversation last year, and you weren't here, Josh, but part of the Voyage Lake LID, the intention, which I think is still good for future LIDs, was for some of the people that are on very, very fixed income, and to maybe help them, or they could apply for some funds from the district to help them with system development charges or anything like that. And I just think that it's a good cause because we support sewering around the lake, and anything that we can help to keep these fixed income people to not have that burden, or even families, because it is, when the LIDs, they put a lien on your property. And so, and it's a substantial amount, so I would like it to stay, but we just need to develop the policies and criteria for the program.
I mean, on the other hand, we're not, I don't see us,
We're not at that point yet.
yeah, I don't see us giving any grants at this point. This wasn't part of the Voyage LID program. And I don't see anything else on the horizon this year that's gonna, I mean, I'd love to say that, yeah, we're gonna have a sewer being installed, but it ain't gonna
Well,
happen.
I believe that, you know, we're invest, you know, that we can keep $30,000 in there to,
Sure.
for the, you know, the investigation of potential
Right.
sewering the north and east side of the lake.
They just changed the wording to
Right.
what,
This probably could be pared way down.
Could you just say sewer investigation and consulting?
yeah, I think that would be good. Perfect.
So just to be clear, we want to keep that in there, but change the language so it encompasses
Yeah,
the
dollar
needs,
amount,
the needs more.
30,000.
Yeah, then we have monies to do whatever needs to be done in order to, if we're moving forward on this.
Right.
The next
You know,
step,
while we're still on it, I mean, one thing, for instance, what's coming right up is we have to have postage and printing for the letter going out to the property owner. So
That should come out of,
does that come out of somewhere else? I mean, I don't know.
you know, I think that's more project related since it's directly related to that effort.
So, well, okay, so what's another term that covers that besides investigation? Well, investigation, because it's seeking information. So, okay, never mind.
yeah, I think that
covered.
covers it.
Outreach, you could do outreach, investigation, consulting.
Yeah, you could
Wonderful.
Does that seem appropriate?
throw outreach in there.
Investigation, consulting, and outreach.
That's a good one. Good three.
Sure, we can think of several more.
Okay. The next section, we briefly discussed this, is under Materials and Services Watershed Protection and discusses the SOS program. We currently have $7,500 allocated for these projects. The district is planning on granting approximately $750 per project, which of course gives us approximately 10 projects funded. We currently already have 2 people interested this year, so that's great. It's a great effort. Kent has been putting a lot of work into that, so 3 projects. So I hope we have a need for 2 or 3 times that amount next year, and I totally foresee that we will once we really get running with this and everyone sees how much good they can do and how they can be a good lake steward and make their yard beautiful as well. So
I think that's a good round number, I mean, in general,
I think so for
what you spent versus, say, the smaller scale.
oh, I just think that we're trying to help those individuals along. I had, when I left the meeting last night, I had an email from the Master Gardener program coordinator, and she had somebody contact her wanting to know all the things exactly what we were talking about. And so I directed her to the website and contacting us. And so, yeah, I think for right now, I think that's plenty. But like Josh says, hey, if we see a need, then, you know,
Yeah, correct, because everybody's not going to be on the grandiose scale of
Right.
what you
right.
correct. And it is up to $750.
And it's a help.
so-
It's not a funding of a project, it's a help.
We're not going to turn anybody away.
No.
No. Well,
I
and
think it's really kind of a recognition that someone's willing to make the effort and expend the funds, because as we all know, it's most likely going to be much higher than $750 to do it, but it's kind of a thank you to saying, hey, you know, we appreciate your efforts.
Absolutely, and it's great to see the community open up to us and allow people like Kent, who work diligently on these programs, to use his expertise and knowledge that he's even used on his own property.
Master gardener.
Yeah, absolutely.
The
next-
SOS program is a reimbursement program, correct? The property
is,
owners have
correct.
to put the money out, and then,
Right.
yeah, so you don't have any results criteria with the work's already been done.
If all the plants die, we
Yeah.
can't go take the money back.
You want the money back?
Yeah, right.
They're all dead.
But
all
they've
of
been
them.
planted. Or
You didn't water the ones that were in the water, and then they
It's a
died.
sliding scale.
Yeah, what is the deal with that? You didn't water the ones that were in the water.
You never know. The next line item deals with the education and communication district at a communication plan drafted and scheduled for review and update this year. I've left these funds in there as the year has not completed yet, and to the best of my knowledge, we haven't completed that review yet. So, Fish and Wildlife, we talked about earlier. This money was committed, the $20,000 we had committed to Salmon Drift Creek Watershed Council is back in our funds. Given the many different projects that we are pursuing, the ones that we're making good traction with, no dollars have been allocated to Fish and Wildlife in this budget. They are, however, going to receive a very, very good direct benefit from our aeration efforts after we get it installed. Dissolved oxygen is a great thing for wildlife, especially in the water.
Especially fish.
Yeah. They tend to need it. The next services is a description, brief description of materials and services, things like bank fees, really a marginal amount there at $120. Our watershed protection funds here is our education and communication, our Save Our Shoreline funds included in that. The $5,480 we mentioned earlier as grass carp funds for vegetation management and control. We'll revisit those. We currently have $60,000 allocated in the consulting section of materials and services to cover anything that we have left in our contract with our engineers on any other contracting activities or anything we see that we will need to do leading up to whatever aeration project we choose. Briefly already spoke about the vehicle, boat, motor, and trailer, 5,000.
So can we just go up to the top of the
Sewer?
that page, sewer? I just want to make sure, again, our messaging is correct. So I'm assuming this 30,000 is the 30,000 we just spoke about a few minutes ago. Is that correct?
Correct.
So we also, we talk about sewer as well as to fund the development of a septic inspection rebate program. So I just want to make sure that, are we actually talking about having funds available that someone could apply for a septic inspection rebate program? That's the question.
We don't have a policy yet.
No.
Correct. So,
Unstated without a policy.
and I knew that. And so I just want to make sure, again, our messaging is correct, so that, my recommendation is we take that out of that paragraph.
I think the whole paragraph should be reworded to refer to the investigation, consulting, and outreach that we just
Right.
talked about.
So
Yeah.
that's a great,
We're on page
great
20
recommendation.
22, right?
24, top of the page.
24.
Very
Yeah.
top.
That's perfect, Susan.
Yeah. What Susan said.
Yeah, what Susan said.
Let's make that consistent.
Very professional meeting.
I'm writing that down. Susan said.
Noted. The next section, as I mentioned, just talks about the vehicle and boat. We've already discussed that. $5,000 appropriation from the general fund for the truck, $5,000 appropriation from the general fund for the boat. Currently, we don't have any hard plans to replace either of those pieces of equipment at this moment. However, I do believe we will be having those discussions this next year to decide what's going to best fit the district. The annual improvement funding, we spoke about this earlier as well. Excess funds in the general fund are transferred to the improvement fund. The improvement fund, we used to fund specific projects, larger projects, especially like our whole lake aeration that we're pursuing at the moment. We're expected to have that $100,000 to be transferred from general fund into the improvement fund. Currently, we do not have any transfers out of the improvement fund scheduled, given the stage of our projects. The capital outlay here, this was prepared before we made the decision to purchase the water quality monitoring equipment, so we can adjust that and revisit it as well. It has the $23,000, $480 included, the grass carper included in that, and $18,000 for the water quality monitoring equipment, which we've decided would be more beneficial to the district to go ahead and purchase, given the ability to and availability of the funds to do it in this budget year rather than in the proposed budget year.
So you'll be able to remove this out of this presentation?
Yeah, we'll have to make that adjustment since we have moved on. Debt service, we discussed earlier, we have no debt service planned this year. We do expect the improvement fund will still have funds in reserve for future expenditures at $370,000, $780.
Just let me ask a question here. Just as, let's say, fantasize with me for a minute that we adopt an aeration program, costs $250,000. We want to pay cash. Where would it come from? This fund, the improvement fund?
Yes. The improvement fund is kind of what we haven't spent over the past years. And as I mentioned earlier, the board directive from 2007, I believe, says that our general fund should not be more than what we're expecting in taxes. So anything over the top has been going into that improvement fund since it's been established, and that is its established purposes for pieces of equipment and particularly large projects.
Okay.
Can that be drawn at any time?
I believe so. We would, of course, have to
Do a supplemental
Justify it.
budget.
do a supplemental budget and
That I
follow.
think.
Yeah, you'd reconvene the budget committee and
Okay,
do a supplemental budget.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So,
Brian,
Well, you know,
are you going to talk John down to that $250,000?
we need less than that. But, you
He's
know,
already under that. I'm just,
Oh, you stated it in,
what I'd really like
I'm
to
already trying to negotiate with him.
no, you are a good negotiator.
What I'd really like
We
to
got
say
performance
is,
guarantees out of him.
I know.
Hey, that's good.
10% off, you were.
what happened when I wasn't in the room? I left for like 5
well,
minutes.
what
Okay, I overstated the case.
I was going to say that the board that put together and set aside these funds and made sure that we're spending within our limits and saving money for the potential for future projects did a wonderful job, because over those years now we've got the monies potentially to do a project such as an aeration project or other things that come up, and if they had spent all their money all those years and didn't save, as well as what we've done over the past few years too, we wouldn't be at this, what I think is a good point in time to potentially do something that's significant on the lake.
No, that's a fantastic point, and I think very, very true, and it still gives us the ability, which I'm sure we will definitely walk down this path the same way, as still to pursue grant dollars, and if we're fortunate enough to get them, that'll only be able to replenish things. So, but it does give us the ability to write the check and complete a project, so.
Absolutely, I agree.
And you know, something to look forward, I'm sorry, Gus.
No,
go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, something to look forward to is that, you know, with the sunsetting of or 80% sunsetting of urban renewal, that differential between, you know, what we spend for general operations and what we have, you know, what we receive and what we spend for general operations is just been increased by 20-some thousand a year. And then that other 20% will sunset, I think, in 6 or 7 years. So it's a ways away, but it's
Good stuff.
better than a kick in the butt, as I like to say.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we can certainly plan on not a specific dollar amount, but property values are rising around the country, and particularly in our area as well. So we can only imagine that more tax revenue will be generated in the
Well,
upcoming years.
we're limited to 3% a year.
From a, tax
Oh, yeah.
standpoint, correct.
Yeah.
Property taxes.
But, yeah.
They'll build more houses, Brian.
Well,
There you
yeah,
go.
true. That's the only way to increase it more than that.
Yeah. Yeah, we should start a construction company.
I already have one.
There you go. The next page is just a brief description, snapshot of the transportation fund. Previously, the board had allocated, when they started the transportation fund, $42,500 through inputs from both the improvement fund and the general fund. This year, it's my understanding that typically that money is drawn from the general fund and the general fund only. So I have appropriated $5,000 for both of those expenditures. Each of those expenditures from the general funds go into the transportation fund, which will give us a total of $52,500 in the transportation fund. And that is the end, other than a lot of forms and numbers and fields, if anyone has any questions about them.
No, I'd just like to, again, compliment you on it. When you're looking at these things hours on end, the typos are, they come up, and so I think compared to some of the other budgets and how much work, this is minimal.
Thanks, Steve.
So a huge shout out to you, and I know an even bigger shout out to Mitch Moore,
I was gonna say it.
who was definitely instrumental last year in simplifying a very complicated budget and terms that I can understand, which I need all the help I can get. Simpler is better for me. But your first year doing this, it's a difficult task for anybody coming in, but you guys, I think, did a fantastic job. We obviously have some corrections to make, which I think are, that's why we do what we do. But again, a huge thank you to Mitch. I know he worked tirelessly helping you out, so hats off to him. So.
He did, and he continues to. I'm going to be in contact with Mitch after this draft to make a few changes, undoubtedly, and after the budget is adopted for the year as well, mainly so I can gain a better understanding for the district. So next year, as we put the budget together, it'll be a more efficient task as far as what numbers need to go where and what our general goals are as far as our template, which we've also discussed with the Devil's Lake plan. So.
Anybody else have any comments or questions?
We made a lot of suggested changes to wording, but we didn't change any amounts of dollars, did we?
Not that I'm aware of. I think it was just wording changes.
Yeah.
So is there any action that we're required to take today?
I move to recommend,
Approval of the budget to the budget committee?
from the Budget Committee to the Devil's Lake Water Improvement District Board.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we take the requested board action that Susan just articulated very well. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same motion. Motion carries unanimously.
And I know we have an audience member that's patiently sat through everything. Miles, do we have any comments from the audience? Thank you.
Fantastic. If that's it, we'll go ahead and adjourn this. Thank you all board members and budget committee members for attending, and Josh for hanging out, and our great recorder over there, and Miles, thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.
Next meeting is.
Next meeting, well, the budget adoption's in June, right?
One thing.
Oh, one thing.
Do we want to change that contingency amount?
Oh, yeah, actually.
Just forgot.
Well,
about
That was.
So
was kinda in
you'll
your-
need to make that adjustment then, that
the
contingency
contingency
to
amount.
The
If that's the
30.
only one.
15% of the budget
No,
approximately.
15% of the budget. Mitch actually just texted me.
So that'll
It's
affect
about
some
$80,000.
worksheets too?
Yeah.
So So is that what we want to do? Yeah, it definitely will. Any changes, any number of changes
Yeah.
we make will have to be echoed through.
Right.
Right.
But
That should be
that was the main
Well,
one, I think.
Pretty good timing,
It's pretty good.
hour and 45 minutes. Actually, we started a little bit late.
Yeah.
So we're going to do the contingency change, okay. Do we want that at 15%? That's,
Put it at approximately 50, close to 15%.
because that's about $80,000?
No, it should be of the 200 and some thousand. So
Okay.
10% would be
I thought it-
20,000.
I think it may be based on the total budget.
Well, why don't you confirm what it?
Find out what it is and then
I
let
think
you know.
it should be of what our operating budget is. That would be
Okay.
my assumption.
Okay.
At least that would be my thought. We wouldn't want it 80,000 because
No,
that's,
no.
you know, a third of our budget. So I think if we did it on our adopted budget of whatever that is, around 200,000 or something, whatever our
You told me you were
expenditures would
And
be.
Mitch has said too, it's not anything, it's 15 is just the max, so that's just a number to go to, you know, we can be anywhere in between, so.
I'd be okay with that.
That's about the only way you can do it besides the property just
We can.
Hey, we didn't finish that.
basically.
Maybe. I'm ready.